December 13, 1996. A man stands at the heavily armed front gate of a maximum security Texas prison. He is not hiding. He is not digging a tunnel. He checks his watch, shoots an irritated glare at the guard tower, and taps his foot. Seconds later, the electronic lock clanks open. A flustered guard rushes over, apologizing profusely as he swings the gate wide. The man nods coldly, walks past the razor wire, past the rifle scopes, and vanishes into the humid Texas night. There are no alarms, no search dogs. 1 hour earlier, this man picked up a prison telephone, dialed the front desk, and impersonated a district judge, ordering his own release. He just beat one of the most secure facilities in America using nothing but his vocal cords. His name is Stephen Russell. This is his third escape, and his fourth will make this look like a child playing a game. It starts not with a breakout, but with a breakdown. In 1990, Stephen Russell is a 32-year-old married insurance salesman living a quiet, suffocating double life in Virginia. He has an IQ of 169, placing him in the top 0.01% of the human population. He can read a room in seconds, memorize complex financial documents after a single glance, and mimic any voice he hears with chilling accuracy. When he finally admits to his wife that he is gay, his carefully constructed suburban existence crumbles. Something inside him snaps. He discovers his true calling and the art of manipulation. He starts with petty insurance fraud, quick money flowing in. But by 1992, the law catches up. Stephen is sentenced to 6 months in Harris County Jail. For an ordinary man, 6 months is a slap on the wrist. For Stephen, it is a death sentence, because the man he loves is dying of AIDS in a Houston hospital. Stephen needs to see him one last time. 4 weeks into his sentence, Stephen spots discarded civilian clothes and a broken walkie-talkie in a garbage bin. To a normal inmate, it is trash. To a genius, it is an exact set of variables required to break the system. He pulls the clothes over his prison uniform and clips the dead radio to his belt. He transforms into a maintenance worker. Late on a Friday, he walks toward a locked security gate separating the detention area from the administrative wing. He raises the dead radio to his mouth and clicks the transmit button twice. Tap. Tap. The guard on duty hears static crackle through his speaker. It is the universal signal of an officer trying to call in. Operating on blind routine, the guard buzzes the gate open. Stephen steps through, descends 2 flights of stairs, and strolls out the front door into the night air. By the time the guards realize inmate 942533 is missing, Stephen is already in a borrowed car racing toward the hospital. He defeated the largest jail in Texas with a broken prop. He is eventually recaptured. But during this second stint, the trajectory of his life changes forever. In the jail law library, Stephen meets Philip Morris, a soft-spoken inmate from the South. It is an immediate, electric connection. Upon release, they build a life together in Houston. Stephen wants to give Philip the world, but honest work will not pay for the luxury he believes Philip deserves. Stephen fabricates an entire professional history, creates glowing references that redirect to his own cell phone, and bluffs his way into a position as chief financial officer of a medical management firm. A convicted felon is now controlling millions of dollars. Over 5 months, he siphons $800,000 from his employer. He buys matching Mercedes, jet skis, and Rolexes. But the auditors eventually find the missing money. In early 1996, Stephen is arrested at gunpoint. Philip watches in terror as his lover is hauled away. The Texas authorities know exactly who they are dealing with. They label Stephen an extreme flight risk. The judge sets his bail at a staggering $900,000 to ensure he rots in a cell until his trial. Late one night, Stephen notices a custodian forgot to lock the door to the administrative office. He slips inside, grabs a telephone, and dials the Harris County Courthouse. He deepens his voice, adopting the measured drawl of Judge Jerry Hurd. He speaks to the night clerk with absolute authority. He states he just held a bond hearing for inmate Stephen Russell and orders the bond reduced to $45,000 effective immediately. The groggy clerk dutifully updates the system. By morning, Philip pays the 10% fee to a bondsman. Stephen waltzes out of custody into the bright Texas sunshine. One phone call, one fake voice. Freedom delivered on demand. They skip town laughing at how easily they fooled the entire justice system. But the law is not shrugging this off. a statewide manhunt kicks into gear. Texas authorities quietly tap the phones of Phillips' relatives and alert the FBI. Within a week, investigators trace a cluster of phone calls to a motel in Florida. On April 5, 1996, a swarm of federal agents converges on a payphone. Stephen steps out of the lobby to retrieve a fax and walks directly into a wall of drawn weapons. The judge, absolutely livid at being impersonated, orders Stephen held without bail. When the gavel finally falls, he is sentenced to 45 years in prison. The lovers are torn apart in shackles. As Stephen is led from the courtroom, he catches Phillips' terrified eye and mouths a silent promise: "I will find you." The authorities think they have finally contained him. They ship him to a maximum security facility under constant watch. But how do you cage a man who treats every prison like a puzzle? Winter 1997. Less than a year into his 45-year sentence, Stephen is already constructing his next escape. Texas prison officials know his face and his tricks. They upgrade his security classification. But even the most imposing fortress walls contain cracks. Stephen finds his weakness in the most mundane of places: the prison art supply closet. Over weeks of careful planning, Stephen secretly stockpiles green felt tip markers from the craft room. Each night, in the privacy of his cell, he pops them open, soaks the ink cartridges in water, and slowly dyes his standard white prison uniform the exact shade of surgical scrubs worn by hospital staff. He is meticulous. He never wrings the fabric, which would create telltale streaks visible under fluorescent lights. Beneath the baggy green costume, he tapes plastic garbage bags tightly around his torso and legs to confuse the scent for search dogs. Every single detail is covered. On Friday, the 13th of December, 1997, the atmospheric and operational conditions align perfectly with his calculated timeline. Stephen dresses in his handmade surgical scrubs. The green fabric is dry, perfectly matching the standard issue uniforms of the medical unit. He grabs a standardized medical clipboard from a supply room to serve as a visual anchor. He strolls with practiced, hurried confidence toward the main administrative entrance of the prison. He times his physical approach to the exact second. The operational officer stationed at the front desk is currently distracted by an incoming personal phone call. The human element is always the weakest link in any perimeter defense. With the practiced annoyance of a busy medical professional running late for a critical procedure, Dr. Russell waves a fabricated identification badge in the general peripheral vision of the guard. He does not stop walking. He heads straight for the heavy steel door. Medical personnel, contractors, and specialists come and go constantly in a massive maximum security facility. The localized guards do not possess the cognitive capacity to personally recognize the facial features of every visiting doctor. Without a single verbal challenge, without triggering a single physical barricade, Stephen pushes open the heavy front door. He steps directly into the bright Texas sunlight. His resting heart rate spikes. He crosses the open prison yard at a carefully measured, unhurried pace. A mechanical guard tower swivels its searchlight optic in his direction. For one frozen moment, Stephen feels every physiological nerve in his body scream at him to run. But the tower guard looking through the scope sees only a physician taking a routine break. The visual data matches the expected environmental baseline. The guard swivels the optic back to scanning the outer perimeter. Stephen fights down the absolute animal instinct to bolt. He maintains his steady stride. He keeps walking until he clears the line of sight. Only when he is safely beyond the outer perimeter fence does he allow his body to break into a dead sprint. He crashes straight through the brush and into the surrounding dense woods. After exactly 100 yards, his kinetic energy maxes out. He skids to a stop. His heart hammers violently against his ribcage. He turns back toward the imposing concrete structure of the prison. He raises his middle finger high in the air. A static, triumphant physical salute to the billion-dollar system that falsely believed it could hold him. He does not linger in the extraction zone. He strips the plastic-wrapped uniform off his sweating torso. He stuffs the physical evidence deep under a rotting log to delay the tracking dogs. He makes his way through the vegetation to the first residential structure he spots through the trees. A startled elderly woman answers his knock. Standing on her wooden porch is a tall, thin man in a white undershirt, slightly out of breath, speaking with perfectly calibrated calm. He claims to be a medical doctor who just survived a terrible kinetic car accident on the adjacent highway. His cellular phone was destroyed in the impact. He states he just needs a vehicular ride to the nearest town to contact emergency services. Within minutes, a kindly civilian stranger is driving Dr. Russell away from the geographic center of his own prison break. By the time the prison administration officials run the head counts and realize the doctor who walked out the front door was actually their highest profile inmate, Stephen is already miles outside the jurisdiction. He is sitting on a stool in a Houston bar. He sips a cold margarita. He watches the breathless live news broadcast coverage of his own escape on the television monitor above the counter. For the third time in his life, he has bypassed an impenetrable fortress. The first operational move he makes is to contact Philip Morris. Philip finished serving his own minor sentence months earlier and was waiting in the civilian world. The two men reunite almost immediately. Within days, they vanish completely from the Texas grid. They travel east across state lines under heavily assumed names and forged identifying documents. They settle in the coastal town of Biloxi, Mississippi, planning to integrate into a quiet life far removed from the Texas judicial apparatus. But the digital footprint of a fugitive is impossible to erase entirely. On the morning of May 22, 1997, Stephen steps out of a cheap motel room to retrieve ice from a vending machine. He walks straight into a coordinated tactical swarm of United States Marshals. Within seconds, his physical forward momentum is halted. He is tackled to the concrete, aggressively cuffed, and left staring into the hard eyes of federal agents who have been hunting his signature for weeks. The Texas state officials are publicly humiliated. A convicted con man armed with nothing but water-soaked felt-tip dye just manipulated his way out the front door of their highest security prison. The presiding judge retaliates with maximum legal force. He slaps Stephen with another 45 years of hard time stacked consecutively onto his existing sentence. His cumulative mathematical prison time now totals 144 years. They physically shackle him from head to toe in heavy iron. They transfer him to a tiny reinforced concrete cell reserved specifically for Texas's most incorrigible and dangerous felons. He is thrown into a 23-hour daily lockdown protocol. Guards mutter to each other in the corridors that they will have to bury this specific inmate in wet concrete to keep him stationary. Most human minds would completely shatter under that kind of crushing, sensory-deprived isolation. But as Stephen sits alone in his 12 by 7-foot concrete box, staring at the blank cinder block walls, his cognitive engine is not focused on defeat. It is racing rapidly ahead to his next structural vulnerability. The authorities falsely calculate that they have finally neutralized his threat. They operate on the assumption that nobody can physically escape a supermax solitary cell. What the bureaucratic system fails to understand is that Stephen's most audacious and complex escape is just beginning to take shape. And for this specific operation, he will not require forged scrubs, fake physical badges, or impersonated audio phone calls. He will utilize a tool far more disturbing and biological: his own dying body. This final maneuver is Stephen J. Russell's operational masterpiece. It is equal parts raw genius and absolute physical self-destruction. It begins with the deliberate, systematic transformation of his own organic flesh. Over the course of several months throughout 1998, Stephen methodically withers his cellular mass away. He drastically restricts his caloric intake, surviving on the absolute smallest possible scraps of unpalatable food and minimal water hydration. He secretly smuggles chemical laxatives into his solitary cell. He swallows them constantly, deliberately inducing chronic gastrointestinal distress and diarrhea designed to shed his physical body weight at a terrifying, mathematically lethal rate. Day after agonizing day, the once robust 188-centimeter-tall man becomes gaunt. His spatial structure hollows out. His limbs become skeletal and frail. The biological transformation is so dramatically severe that the prison medical doctors begin expressing genuine clinical concern. Stephen plays his psychological role to absolute perfection. He shuffles his feet slowly across the floor, feigning profound muscular weakness. He coughs pitifully into his uniform sleeve during physical examinations. He has spent months in the library studying the exact physiological symptoms of late-stage AIDS in exhaustive, microscopic detail. He mimics the respiratory and motor failures with clinical precision, convincing trained medical professionals that you are harboring a fatal autoimmune virus when your blood is completely clean is theoretically impossible. But Stephen possesses one critical systemic advantage. The prison's medical bureaucracy is a sprawling, heavily understaffed, and deeply compartmentalized maze. It is a machine practically begging to be exploited by anyone who understands data flow. Using a mechanical typewriter he has commandeered from the prison library during his 1 hour of out-of-cell time, Stephen begins producing highly official-looking medical documents. He types out fabricated laboratory results showing positive HIV blood tests. He forges specific doctor notes describing rapid cellular deterioration. He specifically targets the data points the system looks for, charting T-cell counts dropping to critically low fatal levels late at night when guard supervision is at its absolute lowest frequency. He slips these forged physical documents directly into the prison's internal bureaucratic mail system. He directs the envelopes to the medical unit, ensuring they are filed straight into his official dossier. If any single nurse or doctor actually halts the process to draw a fresh vial of blood and run a real diagnostic test, the entire operational lie collapses instantly. But the system is designed for speed, not verification. Nobody double-checks the data. The fake documentation winds its way smoothly through the administrative arteries. A typed operational memo eventually arrives on the desk of the facility warden. Inmate Russell. HIV positive. T-cell count critically low. Prognosis terminal. The Texas penal authorities cross-reference the paperwork with Stephen's visually deteriorating physical appearance. They decide, based on cold financial logic, that there is zero institutional point in allocating maximum security resources to guard a dying man. In March 1998, exactly 10 months into his physically agonizing charade, the state officially grants Stephen Russell compassionate medical parole. He is physically transported under absolutely minimal security guard detail to a civilian nursing home in Huntsville, a facility specifically designated for terminal AIDS patients. The prison officials essentially wash their bureaucratic hands of his existence. He will receive palliative chemical care and logically expire within a matter of weeks. The man is, according to all visual and documented metrics, practically a corpse already. Inside the quiet civilian hospice, the medical staff treat him with genuine human kindness. They view him as just another tragic patient fading away into nothingness. He lies motionless in the sterile bed, physically weak as a kitten, but inside his skull, behind those dark sunken eyes, his neural pathways have never fired with more velocity. This is precisely the operational scenario he engineered over 10 months of brutal self-starvation. He is now in an environment with zero physical security architecture, because no institutional protocol accounts for a dying man launching an escape. His plan enters its final, lethal phase. Using the standard civilian courtesy telephone resting on the table beside his bed, Stephen places one final, critical audio transmission. He alters his vocal cords and becomes Dr. Williams, an earnest physician calling directly from the hospice administration desk. He contacts the Texas Prison Parole Board. He regretfully informs the board members that patient Stephen Russell has taken a sharp, irreversible biological downturn. He states a specialist in another state is running an experimental chemical treatment that might miraculously extend the patient's life, but it requires immediate interstate travel. He asks the board if they would officially approve a medical transfer, eager to completely avoid any negative press regarding a dying inmate. The board members sign off on the paperwork without a microsecond of hesitation. Days later, the voice of Dr. Williams calls the board back with tragic administrative news. Inmate Russell succumbed to his biological illness before the physical transfer could be initiated. Stephen J. Russell has officially died. The calendar date is March 13, 1998. Friday, the 13th. On official state paper and permanently encoded in the Texas criminal database, Stephen Russell is legally categorized as deceased. They just opened the gates for a ghost. Stephen physically walks out the front glass doors of the hospice facility. He is holding a forged death certificate with his own legal name printed in black ink on the paper. There are no armed guards. There are no iron shackles. There is just a tired-looking, extremely thin man pushing an empty wheelchair outside to get some fresh oxygen. Once he clears the visual perimeter of the parking lot, he stands up completely straight. He aligns his thin skeletal frame. He vanishes seamlessly into the dense urban streets of Houston as a totally free man. It is the most daring, frictionless escape in the history of the state. Pure social engineering applied to a rigid bureaucracy. Stephen has successfully conned the entire multi-billion-dollar Texas penal system into signing his release papers and sending verbal condolences afterward. His former jailers are left completely slack-jawed and thoroughly outclassed. True to his core psychological programming, Stephen makes an immediate, direct beeline for the only human variable that matters in his equation: Philip Morris. The operational plan from the very beginning was to reclaim their life together. Stephen has literally resurrected himself from the dead for love. For a few precious, unmonitored days after his official systemic death, Stephen is truly free. He is a ghost gifted with a second timeline. He could easily disappear forever, establish a new identity overseas, and completely vanish from the radar. But true to his behavioral profile, he cannot resist executing one last financial scheme to secure funding for his new existence. It proves to be a fatal miscalculation. Texas authorities, deeply skeptical of the incredibly neat and tidy conclusion to their most embarrassing case, launch a quiet internal investigation. They search the records. There is no biological autopsy. There is no physical body in the morgue. There is zero empirical proof of the conman's actual demise. The paper death certificate is subjected to forensic scrutiny and immediately exposed as a clever mechanical forgery. When the systemic truth finally emerges, the institutional humiliation is absolute. This man tricked the highest officials into signing his release and successfully faked his own biological death right under their optical sensors. The single largest, most aggressive manhunt in Texas history immediately begins. In early April 1998, barely 3 weeks after he casually walked out of the hospice, Stephen's statistical luck permanently runs dry. Acting on a localized civilian tip, an overwhelming force of heavily armed U.S. Marshals corners him at a commercial office building in Florida. He is standing in a machine, faxing fraudulent financial paperwork under yet another assumed alias. This time, there is zero margin for escape. Russell is physically arrested for the fourth and final time. As the heavy steel cuffs click shut around his thin wrists, the chase that originally began with a phony judge's voice officially terminates with a gaunt, exhausted man sitting in federal custody. Texas throws the absolute maximum weight of the judicial system at him. Stephen J. Russell is mathematically sentenced to 144 years in prison, 99 years specifically allocated for the mechanical escapes, 45 years allocated for his complex financial crimes. It is a biological life sentence executed twice over. Today, Stephen sits in absolute solitary confinement inside the Polunsky unit, the exact same maximum security facility currently housing Texas's lethal injection death row. Prison administration officials consider his intellect such an extreme systemic threat that he is isolated for 23 hours every single day. He is physically moved to a completely new concrete cell every single week to prevent him from mapping the structural architecture or establishing a routine. No human being ever hears his voice. His only sensory input is the cold texture of concrete walls and the absolute silence of thick, bulletproof glass. The state has permanently silenced the great imposter, locking away the specific vocal cords that brought the entire Texas justice system to its knees. The ultimate paradox of the Polunsky unit, a man who never fired a weapon, never took a hostage, and never physically harmed a single human being, is kept under containment conditions explicitly reserved for the most violent cartel enforcers and serial murderers. That is the exact mathematical price of an institutional bruised ego. Stephen Russell used nothing but a courtesy telephone and a water-soaked green marker to completely dismantle the multi-billion-dollar security apparatus of an entire state. The system will never forgive him for mathematically exposing their cognitive blind spots. As long as he has oxygen to speak, no concrete wall is considered thick enough. If you are ready to witness another mechanical failure of an impregnable system, you must examine the only family to completely bypass the Berlin Wall 3 times. They did not dig an underground tunnel. They built 2 motorized kites and flew directly into the most heavily fortified, radar-locked airspace on the planet. The visual file is on your screen. Subscribe to Prison Break Stories. The investigation continues.